products that I worked on, we created automation and then basically evolved it into the application under development. I learned this methodology through the work of AT&T Bell Labs when they constructed the Unix operating system in the 70s. And if you look at Unix, how it's structured, it's all automation hooks, standard in, standard out, standard error, all this beautiful stuff. So for me, automation is something that has always been part of software engineering. And recently I've spent a lot of energy trying to understand how to help people in testing understand how automation can be part of their toolkit, and therefore looking at automation really as something that they can use to support their testing, to help learn, to help leverage things. I want to get rid of a lot of stuff that I see today, which is I think quite negative, which is vendor claims about automation. I think there's a lot of false claims out there. And I'm trying to show people that automation is a fantastic thing if it's part of a solution to a problem. So I believe in today, the approach that I'm trying to use with testers is to teach how to solve problems in testing and how automation can be part of the solution. That's today.
Yeah, that's what
what you think of that.
That's what Martin pointed out after our keynote.
Martin who?
Martin Gijssen, the Dutch guy. He said he rather talks about automation in testing than automated testing, because you cannot automate testing, and I fully agree with what Rob said. It's about supporting everything you do in testing, so make it easier, improve testability, remove all the silly redundant shit that you don't want to have in your projects, and support people doing awesome work.
Yeah, I'm going to skip you unless you want to go. Do you have something to say, Rich?
I always have something to say,
That's
but
true.
skip me.
We'll come back to you. You get to finish strong.
Ooh.
When I started automation in 1995, it was at a company called Newbridge, which ended up being bought by Alcatel, and we had a homegrown automation environment that was amazing. It was really, really good. Rob actually saw it. It was written in TCL, TCL, Tool Command Language, but it supported multiple releases, so it had variants in it. It was everything was abstracted, so it was very robust. It was maintained. It had a fantastic log viewer, which I honestly haven't seen an equivalent to in the last 27 years, and ever since I left Alcatel, I have missed that system. That the outside world in general hasn't caught up to what we had starting in 95. So I was spoiled having probably the best framework that I've seen for the first 12 years. And now in the last 10 years, I've only seen mostly junk. It's disturbing.
So what keeps you from building it? Because you're now the automation architect.
That is true. And honestly, right now where we are, we do have, it's just open source. We're just using Node.js and Nightwatch in, running in JavaScript, and Visual Studio tied in with Jenkins. And it's actually not too bad, but it's not an entire log viewing framework and everything else that was part of the
to be fair,
system.
Alcatel was telco. Telcos have been doing automation since before they used computers, and they're really good at it. If you look at the early work of Harry Robinson on model-based testing, it was all AT&T switches that he was testing, and it was state model-based to automate the whole thing, find these weird conditions. And I think that you were blessed to have the opportunity to spend so many years working in that context.
Yeah, I was, and it definitely helps me see what could be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
makes it also doesn't make some of the claims you see today like laughable.
Yes,
because you've seen it done.
And when one of the things I did at Saxaw Fifth just last fall, I suggested we rework our here's a piece of automation, here's another piece of automation, and they were all individually coded, all strung together, and our automation was taking 6.5 to 7 hours to execute. And I said, well, why don't we make workflows and string them together? They can still be focused on, this is a checkout workflow, this is a search workflow. And we did that, and the execution time dropped to 1.5 hours, and our coverage went up. And we cut out some redundancies, but we had automation that would log in, search for a product, put it in the cart, check that the taxes were right. Log in, find an item, put it in the cart, check that the shipping was right. I'm just going, why are we doing this to ourselves? That's an extreme example, but the idea is we managed to knock off 80% of our execution time by just streamlining it into workflows.
Without compromising regression confidence.
No, we actually increased our coverage, and our reliability has gone up because we're not executing for 7 hours. If there's a network blip, it's far less likely to impact us. So it was all good. Okay, Ben.
Go ahead, Ben.
Mr. Silent.
Yeah, so I started in testing in 1991, and automation has been
Really
part
old.
of pretty
Really
much
old.
everything that I've done. So
Makes
you know,
me feel older
my-
every second.
but my experience sounds a little bit similar to yours, and it wasn't at a organization that was a telco company, but we did a lot of testing for telco companies and for telco systems. Although that's not what I worked in, but there was this understanding that there were testing tasks we wanted to automate, and this was a place where we had for test reporting and our bug database, that sort of thing. It was a 3-ring binder with sheets of paper in it. So in this world, we were looking for things, how can we use automation to collect? So like my first test automation I created was written in WordPerfect's macro language to turn test data we collected and restructure it, print it out on the forms we had to put in the binders, and then put it into a database so that we could do some analysis.
For those
on
of
it.
you watching at home, WordPerfect was a predecessor and a competitor to Microsoft Word.
Yes, it was the word processor.
It was. It was
The
way ahead.
They
that
had-
you're talking about, that was the one they introduced in version 5.2. I remember.
Yeah. This was 5.2,
Yeah, there you go.
and
They're old. They're old. Serious.
so
I remember getting WordPerfect 5.2 working with Xerox laser
Did it make you feel
printers.
good about life?
I recently made I just made a WordPerfect reference, but made one to some developers talking about what their WordPerfect's transition to Windows, and then I realized that was before some of these developers were born.
As a side note, Kem Kaner did a lot of great work for testing something called WordStar, which was
Yeah.
A predecessor to WordPerfect.
Predecessor to WordPerfect.
To WordPerfect.
And so a lot
Yeah.
of great test design techniques came
Yeah.
from these word processes.
Yeah. So we did automation for that, helping manage our test data. Then we created our own test management systems to help us. So that it would help us. We would select what sorts of things we needed to test, and it would say, here's the test cases that match. We did automation to where we could capture data for each of our test criteria. Someone mentioned having one automated test case for every single requirement. That's kind of what we did. We
Well, that was the
we had at
insurance
least
company
one.
example from-
Yes, and we
Which is
so we had test cases,
Our
and then
audience
each of those test cases would have criteria attached, and each of those criteria had a short little C program that would analyze the data, or some of them would ask the tester, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see
Wow.
this? And we would collect their answers. And so we
interesting.
automated.
I call that semi-automated.
Yeah, so it was a mix of people. It would guide the tester through the steps they had to do. In places it was automation. It would say, capture the data, take the floppy disk out of this computer, put it in this one, and
May I
analyze the
Take
data.
that extent and
Yeah.
just ask a question to the group here, because I've, if you don't mind, I've recently
That's the whole point
been
of
very
this thing.
disturbed in some of my consulting work, where I'm actually looking at automation created by people with tools that are not bad tools. I have to say that actually the tools and frameworks and claims are not that evil. But what they've done with it is so freaking shallow. It's driving me nuts. Like there is a test automation suite that I looked at recently, like the code of the suite, and they're supposed to be testing synchronization between database from clients to server, multiple clients and servers. This is for medical data for clinical trials. This is really important stuff. And to test the synchronization,
Wasn't it, Mike?
no, it wasn't yours. It's a different company.
Just
And
checking.
It's real stuff going on today, and you take a look at this test, and all they're doing in the end is checking to see is some sort of file there. Does the file exist? And they're not looking at the content of the file. And I'm looking saying, my gosh, this is such a shallow test. Where's the cognition? Where's the thinking? Didn't you design this automation so that you can actually assess correctness? And it was like, They didn't do it.
They did. The file existed. That's
The
correct.
file
Sure.
exists.
That's the most shallow check
So-
I can ever imagine in a million years.
Did they look at the size of the file
No.
to see
No.
if it was
no,
non-zero?
nor the date of the file. They just looked at the file exists.
Wow.
So I had one also in healthcare space, and this was about 20 years ago, that they did a slightly better check, and I was told that we have automation and that checks this is medical information that was created, and they would export database tables that were delivered to customers, basically to CSV or pipe delimited files. Customers would import it into their systems, and we, rather than over the internet, this is how we deliver data on tapes or
Once again,
or
old.
CDs.
Yeah.
No, we did CDs. This was first
Oh,
company-
CDs.
Yes.
Woo.
But I
Flexible
was
floppy disks.
told we have automation that does verification of this data, and they asked me to review it and do the next generation because we were replacing the system that produced that data with the new one. They wanted me to look at this. So I looked at the automation, and it checked, does the file exist? And it counted the number of columns in
Just
each
the number of
row.
columns, right?
In each row. This table's supposed to have 7 columns. Yeah, they all had 7 columns. This one's
Each
supposed to
row
have
had
10.
7 columns. Well, that's
Ooh.
slightly
Yeah,
better
yeah,
than
so-
just...
yeah, so
It's a
slightly
little better
better.
in my case, right?
But management's perception was that we have automated tests that tell us this data is good.
Exactly.
So why are the customers complaining that the data is bad? So I think that's one.
They
of
had the right number of columns, so they
Yes.
should just...
But
suck it
in
up.
contrast,
And they should be happy.
with Paul's example from Alcatel, where you basically were busting your butt figuring out strategies to assess correctness, so you had clever stuff. Plus the other example you gave from the supply chain or the purchasing software, where you basically, let's optimize this so that we're not doing redundancy. But it's clever ways to assess correctness that
Yes.
seems to drive excellence in
Yes.
automation.
Yeah.
Shallow, weak checks,
Yes.
not that I'm against checks, but shallow, weak checks don't tell
All
you very much.
automation is checks.
All automation is checks?
Yeah.
Some of it doesn't.
Some is
It doesn't.
producing data and checking nothing.
Ooh, good point.
I've seen plenty of
All-
test tool vendor demos that have no assertions in their
And
tests.
generalizations are
Yeah.
easy to break down.
Yes.
But your point is well taken.
But
Anyway.
most automation is that is assessing correctness is doing checking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can think of one exception, which again Harry Robinson, when he was testing Google Maps.
Oh, the beautiful assessment with the
Yeah. So
distance
what he did
calculation.
at this point, and I would argue to say that this wasn't strictly a check because it was with random points within the continental
heuristic.
United States, and he would randomly pick 2 points in the country, have Google Maps determine the best routing, and then reverse them.
You know,
And then
Yes.
determine the best routing, and then overlay the two maps over top of each other. And if they differed by more than a certain number of pixels, then it would get kicked out for a human
and they
to
did
look
distance-
at and evaluate.
they also did a distance calculation too.
And a distance calculation.
Yeah.
You can have some sort of
It's clever assessment.
intelligent automation, because I was at a project where the developers created a data generator and then put that in automated checks, so that and they were checking the quality of the data. So they're actually finding.
But they're generating rich varieties of data.
Yes.
Variety of data.
Algorithmically.
But they've got some rules. So were those clear, explicit assertions, or were they based off of rules?
No, they were just throwing in all kinds of data, and then see how the application.
How the application performed.
would perform, how long it would take to calculate stuff, and if the right screens would pop up. And those last things were checks, but they were generating a lot of data and then just throwing it in. And we found some interesting things that we didn't. There were not expected results up front. So we were learning from it. So it is possible, but the possibilities are very limited.
Well, one of the things we did with that test management system I mentioned is it was built in, is that we had 3 states of result from our automation, our automated checks, and it wasn't just pass. We had pass and fail, and then we had inconclusive. And that allowed us, there were places where we didn't have clear rules that we could algorithmically say this is good
So
or
you brought in
bad,
experts?
but we could do to some level to in some cases say this is good, and others where we're not sure.
Yeah.
So that we're not sure level got inconclusive, and then that we would generate, the automation would generate data to make it easier for the tester to analyze what happened and determine whether or not it was good.
Yeah, what we did at Alcatel, I mentioned this in the talk we just did, that we had a huge amount of data that was gathered over the performance of a DSL line, and it would create a chart, and that chart could be evaluated by a human in seconds, just a few seconds. But for us to automate it, we figured it would take a few months to automate it.
Sounds like Richard Leak is in the room here.
Yeah. So how many times did you have to execute that to get back your months of automation, plus then the evaluation as to whether it was correctly doing it? While I definitely trusted all the people on my team to look at it and say that's good or that's bad. So.
Yep.
There's a hybrid experience I have that relates to Ben's example. Two of them actually. One was in the medical software business where we were testing medical knowledge bases, and one was in the fashion industry when we were testing fashion size calculations. That was actually for landsend.com. And in both cases, this was basically exploratory testing. There was actually situations where what we did was we generated lots and lots of data, and we tried to sort of assert or assess that this data was the correct thing, and we could figure out if it was something we weren't sure about, to your term. But then we would bring in a subject matter expert or a guru in that and work with them. And in fact, for the medical case, if we didn't get two independent observers, to doctors, specialists in whatever the domain was, to agree, we pulled it. Like we didn't, that could not be in our medical knowledge base if two doctors disagreed with it. And for the fashion one, what we did was we did size calculations, and we had to validate not that the calculation was correct, but that the model we created to do the calculation was a model that the fashion was designed for, which was fascinating to find out that there were some inputs.
I'm fascinated that you could create fashion models.
Yeah, 192 parameters to create a fashion model. It's fascinating how to do that. It was a lot of interesting testing. Did you ever hear of an underbust? Just lots of measures, lots.
I am aware.
But then
of
you get
that
the
measure.
domain expert in, and the domain experts that we were working with on that project couldn't get through a metal detector at an airport. They were just metal everywhere, like just.
Oh,
You don't get the humor in that. Okay, anyway, that's a Canadian thing.
surgery.
But the point was that we captured the result and then we put it in databases. And for subsequent regression, would say, does the new result match the database? And if not, bring in the expert. And I think that's a nice blend of sort of automation, assessing correctness, and realizing, hey, this is uncertain.
Right.
Let's
Instead
bring
of
in-
saying fail, you say,
or
I don't know.
this is flaky.
Right.
Yeah, so you compared to the previous.
We compared to a baseline, yeah.
Okay.
Which in the fashion industry was a quarterly master. So every 3 months there was sort of a master, and the data we were using was actually the same data they were using to physically manufacture the garments.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
it was pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah. And I've done that looking at data. I've also done similar through UIs, built what I've labeled a tandem test automation, that basically you create either the same application with two different versions of the data or two different versions of the application with the same data, and then do the minimal necessary to code how to detect what's on the screen and have it randomly explore the application in one version and then do it in the other, and diff any of those that were different, and then generate a report that people could look at
So random
and say,
walk.
here's all the difference. And you could, and you could see, oh, this is an expected difference. This is a not expected difference.
Interesting.
Which then provoked we had to create some tools to help reduce the duplicates out of that.
And what type of company do you work for?
Do I work for now? A test tool
Test tool vendor.
Yes.
Oh yeah, and
Yes.
do you have any outrageous claims you'd like to make?
Would you like to make some?
No, I would not like to make outrageous claims. I would like to build some tool like I just described.
So maybe Ben's story is a good one. Why don't you share your experience with that?
Not the whole, like a shortened version.
Yeah,
I got a
just
slide deck.
I know you did. Your whole
Take out-
keynote from CAS 2014, please.
You do not need to bring the cape out.
Okay,
Let me
go.
get you some more
Go.
water.
No, but the story is that I was with the release of the healthcare.gov website. which is a marketplace for people to buy health insurance as part of the Affordable Care Act. I initially tried to use the website to find health insurance options for my granddaughter who didn't qualify under my employer's insurance, or my daughter would have had to pay. But there was, a new law, this new website, and I thought, let me go look at it, see what the new law allows. See what insurance options might be available, see what government subsidies might be available that were new to cover health insurance costs. And I just found a horrible mess. And, as I'm discovering this mess, bug after bug after bug, I turned on developer tools and started looking for the bugs. But it didn't take a whole lot of effort to look. But there were things from, like, the thing was just not performant. It would, when you sign up, initially I couldn't log in after I signed up because they created basically every one of the information pages you visited. It would add to a cookie the history of your browsing. The cookie got so large that the requests were dropped and it returned 400 error. But anyways, in the process of doing, there was just the annoying, and we can't use this, and it was all over the news. You can't use this website. But then I started looking at what was happening, and I saw things such as when they sent the validation email. You sign your account, they confirm you on the email address, they send you an email that has a code that you enter, you click a link. That same link and code they generated was also returned in the browser, so you didn't really need the email address. And then in the midst of this, I needed to reset a password. I looked at reset password, and they did the same thing. They returned to the browser things that shouldn't have been returned to the browser.
How about stealing sessions?
So I could go through their password reset and basically get everything I need for a phishing campaign. And we later learned that they had no system monitoring or logging, that the people involved were watching CNN to know if their system was up. So it was just a mess. But I initially found some issues, and I talked to a woman with Consumer Reports, a consumer-centric consumer advocate magazine in the United States. They also do reviews of new products. But I talked to them, and after they talked to me, they published an article saying they recommend you don't try and sign up for this website. Give it another month, was their recommendation. So then I got all kinds of calls from reporters after that. But in the midst of this, I started finding security vulnerabilities. And I looked for ways to report them. I called customer service. They didn't know what to do with it. They told me to call the FBI, call my local police department to report security vulnerabilities.
Call the president.
It was just nonsense. So I started.
That's the real support guys.
Yes.
They were telling you to call the cops.
Yes, call the police, because they didn't understand the difference between there's a software bug that may compromise someone's information versus I'm saying my information has been compromised and stolen. So they only saw this.
Could have easily.
Well, if there's been a crime committed, you should call the police.
I find that's for kids' education with
Yes.
Yeah.
that information.
Right. So you found that the session IDs were sequential, and that you didn't need a cookie to use a different ID, so you could.
So that I didn't explore because
that was dangerous.
They do arrest people for intentionally trying to.
Right.
And there had recently before this there had been a case. I think it was Sears Web's credit card or something. Someone found they could just increment by one the number in the URL and see someone else's account. Well, then that person got arrested or something, as I recall.
Right.
So I'm aware of I don't want to. I will use it as a user. I will only provide inputs related to me. I will only look at what's available to me. But then I also saw there were validation or verifications they tried to do of the information I gave that would go to back-end IRS and Social Security systems. And rather than ask the IRS, is the income he says he has within the right range, it would return the IRS records of what my pay was. Or they would return the records from the credit bureau with my information they used to validate my identity. So there were just bugs absolutely everywhere that were threats to people's privacy, potential threats to security, identity theft. So I started blogging about them, and that got more attention. And then in the time, I'm trying to find someone with the government that I could report these to, and I couldn't. And finally, I realized I would blog without revealing the details. If it was security vulnerabilities, I'd then update the blogs to talk about details once it was fixed. But basically, to get things fixed, I found a contact reporter for a news magazine who had some contacts within Health and Human Services, and he was able to get some things done. I suspect, from what I understand, that he might have basically threatened to go public with some things, and they gave them a chance to fix it and give him an exclusive, response. And it was kind of it was the press.
Yeah, the press
that got me through. And like I don't watch cable TV news, but like I would look, and people are talking about this hacker that broke into the system. I'm like, I didn't break into the system. And
what did they call you in Congress?
Yeah, so in Congress, didn't they say?
So in Congress testimony, someone said there was a hacker broke in because they were repeating what Congress people repeating what they heard on CNN and MSNBC and wherever else they were.
Did you have your photo on CNN?
No.
Missed opportunity.
I did other networks on TV, CNN, I did some radio.
Okay. Wow.
But in like one of those radio interviews, they had callers calling in who expected me to be an expert in the law. And I'm like, the healthcare law. And I'm like, no, that's not. I mean, I'm just someone trying to get health insurance for my granddaughter. But in the congressional testimony, it was raised, it was a breach, and Kathleen Sebelius, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, said there was not a breach. There was a blog by a sort of skilled hacker.
A sort of skilled hacker.
We are sitting here with a sort of skilled hacker.
Yes.
Isn't that great?
Yes. But this took a tremendous amount of time. Was a huge distraction. Thankfully, my boss was tolerant of some of my distraction. His boss always introduced me as the bane of Obama's existence to people, and he had glee in doing that.
But you had no political.
No, there was no political motivations here.
No, I wanted insurance.
Yes, I wanted insurance. I saw the laws should succeed or fail based on its own merits, not because of a bad website.
Yeah.
But it was terribly political environment.
They just pissed
there were
off the
people
wrong
that would
person.
not admit there was a problem for political reasons. Others that saw it as the law's bad because the website's bad.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also very difficult to tread. So like that was a case when you mentioned professionalism, that I reached out to a number of professional colleagues, and like before I'd write something, I'd ask them for review, and I'd find someone that I knew was a staunch conservative and someone who I knew was a staunch liberal, and get feedback from both of them, because I wanted to try and stay out of the political fray. And some of this was my responding to accusations that were made against me, saying I was politically motivated or I somehow broke the law. My wife was concerned people would show up at the door and take me away. But I was very careful, ethically. I didn't not only want to violate the law, but be ethical both in my reporting and in the things I did. But even just, without trying to push the barriers, there was just so much wrong. But I believe,
Did
because
your daughter ever get health insurance?
My granddaughter,
your granddaughter.
Through healthcare.gov, no.
Damn it.
Through other mechanisms.
Is this one of the granddaughters that I meet frequently?
This is the oldest one. Yes.
Okay, pictures.
We'll share the pictures offline.
Yes, we can share.
Listening to this story, and because I don't have a story where I tested stuff for free, serving my country. So, and I seriously don't want to be on CNN.
Oh, get a green card.
Yeah, but on professionalism, I have many stories, and I'm seriously disappointed in the people I meet who call themselves professional testers. Years ago, I was challenged by Helena. and she said like, okay, so you talk about people are not being professional. What do you exactly mean? So how do you recognize professionalism in a test? So I wrote a blog post about it, and I interview people who have been tester for like 20 years, and we talked about automation earlier, where people just only check the file. I've worked with a person who was doing testing, and then I said, okay, so what did you check? And he looked at me like, what do you mean? What did I check? So what checks did you do? And he said, I knew I forgot something. And I was like, seriously? You've been 10 years in testing and you just do stuff. And so I have so many stories of people that I interview and say, okay, so what was the last book you read or last blog post or video or conference? And they look at me like, well, I did ISTQB in 2014. Does that count? Seriously? What have you been doing the last 10 years? It makes me scream. Want to scream.
It's tiring.
Yeah.
It's tiring.
Yes.
And Paul, you know that I've been in this battle for my whole career almost, and it's exhausting. I'm not going to give up. I believe that testing is such an important profession. I believe strongly that the type of stuff that Ben is exemplifying is something that we have people in our field who have the skills to make the world a better place. And I also know today that we are all of us, everyone, know someone, at least one person, whose life actually depends on software. Life actually depends on software.
I think we all got here on airplanes run on software.
Some planes, not the planes that you fly on, but the Flintstone ones with the pterodactyl wings don't have software. But most of the other ones, it's all software.
Yeah.
And I think that today also there's millions and millions of billions of mobile apps out there. I think there's an opportunity, a fantastic opportunity for people with skills in testing to work for the consumer, not for the software developer, but for the consumer. And I hope that people like you, for example, as an entrepreneur in software testing, looks for opportunities, and somehow we can maybe market opportunities where what we're doing is we're acting as a defender of the consumer and trying to I don't want to hold vendors to account, I just want to serve a consumer. I was saying, hey, before you buy the software, let me show you if it meets your need or not. And somehow I'll charge you a bit of money for that, but it's not like I'm testing it to see does every regression case work for the whole world. I'm saying, does it actually solve your problem? Will it hurt you? Will it harm you? That sort of stuff. And I really believe that we need to use those skills for that type of thing.
Absolutely.
It's an open market right now. We have fantastic people, smart people in schools. I'm not going to give up, but I'm afraid. And what I've seen has happened is every little baby initiative to try to turn testing into sort of like a professional thing, every little baby one that I've seen so far has turned into a nightmare that's been somehow taken over by people selling training for certification methods and all sorts of things that are I'm not suggesting these people don't have the right to do that. It's a business. I don't want to trash a business or any organization, but every time I see something that's like it looks like you want to make testing like a professional, like maybe a plumber is a professional, right? We have less regulations in testing than plumbers do, and we're telling software people that this software can be used in a heart operation or something like that. Come on, what's wrong with this picture? So I'm tired of this debate. I'm tired of this fight. And I'm sad about the fact that every time there's even a little initiative, Cam tried 2 or 3 initiatives in his career. Everyone failed totally, and EST tried, it failed.
But it's professionalism against commercial initiatives, and money always wins.
Yeah, so
there's also public attitude, and something that my wife Karen has said. We've trained the current generation of people. She's been in school for a long time. She went back to school when we moved to the U.S. 12 years ago. She became a chiropractor, so she spent time at school with, like in class with the young people of today, and the tolerance that the current newly graduating generation and younger have of bad software is extreme. We've trained them that bad software is normal. Not we, but people who keep spewing out.
We've also trained them that all you have to do is vote the right thing and the vendor is going to go bankrupt.
Right.
The-
So
the-
yeah, there's a lot of power they have, but there's also a lot of acceptance of
Sure.
bad software. I mean, we can go back to Flappy Birds. It was a horrifically buggy program, but everyone wanted it and everyone
iTunes.
played it. iTunes, especially iTunes on Windows.
Well, but iPhone 4.
Yeah,
Which
there's
there's
lots and lots of examples of just horrific software out there that can work, and that's the level that unfortunately we seem to have gotten to is, can the software work? Not will it work reliably, will it solve my problem, will it not annoy me? It's just gotten to the point of it works, ship it, as opposed to, you know, what if I don't follow the exact step? What if I pause before I click on this? What if I click in the wrong order?
Is
Oh,
software
it's
the only
locked up.
business that has that sort of sloppiness? Like, are there other?
You
fields
mentioned
in
if
there?
car manufacturers had
I-
that, you
I-
could drive
Car
along, your
manufacturers, yeah.
doors would fall off.
Yeah, but cars are regulated to some extent.
Safety.
But there's also, you know, this
We have
horrible,
regulated
this
industries.
horrible software. People are making money with it,
Yes.
and maybe it does work most of the time for
Good
most
enough.
people, and maybe at least from the perspective of whoever's shipping this software.
Good pause.
There's a first article I read
that it is
yeah.
good enough.
That's
But
right.
could it
so-
be?
Good enough, yeah.
Could it be that we need like the double the amount of people in IT that we currently have? So
Well, I think so.
even if you're mediocre or lower, they will hire you no matter.
Well, because there's a shortage of programmers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a shortage. There's huge pressure to keep costs down. So, like you mentioned, you know, could people volunteer time and report things? I encounter bugs all the time. Some of them, and it's not nearly even most of them, you know, I tweet about, and I tweet about
quality product.
because I know.
Qualified.
Because I know there are software people, developers, and testers
Agreed.
following me, and I give it as examples. Sometimes I will tweet at whatever the company is, and their customer service people are not prepared to take reports of software bugs. It's the same as I found with healthcare.gov. They're just not equipped, whether through Twitter or I call them or go to their website and find an online chat. Their focus is we want to solve this person's problem right now. If I'm reporting a systemic issue, they just don't know how to do it. They're not equipped to do that.
Start with Paul. He's recently done that.
My wife just started to be a software
But do you
tester.
still love her? Is it the,
I love my wife very much. Yes, yes. So
question.
Oh,
I actually, she had trained as a chiropractor, and just as she graduated, COVID came in, so she didn't have an opportunity to set up a business. And then she says she's too old to build a practice. What else could she do? And so I obviously I've known her very well. We've married 27 years, and I said, I think you'd be a good software tester. And she said, but I don't know all these things. And I said, but you think critically, you're creative. I think you could be an effective software tester. She just started a job at a company 4 weeks ago. And so I encouraged her to join. I didn't discourage her. I still think software testing is an excellent industry. I did encourage both of my sons to be software testers. Neither of them chose to do that. That's their decision. But I think the industry is good. If I was talking to someone younger who hasn't gone to school yet and wants to go to school, I would suggest learning about programming. I don't think you need to be a coder, but having knowledge and able to code would definitely help you. Being able to write your own tools, being able to write something in like Visual Basic in Excel to manipulate data, or what you had mentioned you had done in your very first job. So doing that, but also whoever is already a software tester, just think critically, be creative. Don't just toe the party line and do the bare minimum. Show some professionalism and try to make the product actually better and not annoying for your customers.
Ben.
Okay, that's one answer.
So I've had a number of young people in my life, in living in my house at times, that have been looking for some job that pays significantly well, and I've at times suggested software testing, and kind of my recommendations to them have been learn enough about programming and how computers work. I think that really is becoming more essential, especially, and I found with a lot of these young people, they don't understand the things that even even things that Karen would understand just through using computers, because they've grown up in a different era where the computers and the mobile phones are all simple and easy to use. My 4-year-old grandson uses tablets and uses the computer, but has no understanding of how any of it works. And it used to be you had to have some understanding of how they work to even use them. So I noticed that there's just basic gaps in that what files are and that sort of thing that some people don't understand. So I'd say fill in those gaps if you need them. Learn some very basics of programming, and then come test with me. I'd love to spend time with young people and do testing with them and coach them to do testing.
You know how many people are going to reach out to you and say,
Oh,
Not many.
not many. That's
you're going back to service to country, service to
And
the
it doesn't
world.
say anything about him, but about them.
Yeah.
So I would build on top of what Ben said, because I think fundamentals of computer and IT stuff is important. But I would like to add, keep learning, try different things. Rob has a complete different course than RST is. They both teach probably the same principles, but in a different way. See what works for you. Keep and just reach out to people. Go to conferences like this. We had 8 tutorials, 7,
9 tutorials.
9 tutorials. So there's so many great stuff. I like talks. They can inspire you, but you don't really learn something there. So go to these workshops and do the work. Experiment. Find people like us. And say, hey, can we pair with you? Show how you do testing, and I'll show how I do testing, and just keep trying and learning. I think that will be my.
Yeah. So I'm confronted with helping people start their careers a lot, and probably my sample space is bigger than yours because of my work at the university. Right? Mm-hmm. So I get to work with lots and lots of people, and they're early in their careers, and I want to encourage them. Many of the comments and concepts that you guys have said fit into sort of my rants, but I believe it's important that anyone starting in a technical profession have a very open mind and realize that how the profession is practiced today is going to be different from how it's practiced next year and the year after. And I think testing takes that to extremes, and it's not like programming where you can learn a programming language and maybe run the wave for that for 5 years. In testing, you've got to be ahead of the curve and behind the curve at the same time.
Yeah.
So you have to know what the upcoming technologies are and the older ones and the variants of that. Therefore, have an open mind, learn new technologies. You don't have to master technologies, but certainly have computing models. Realize there's computing models, and always learn, continuously learn. And to help you with that, I think it's important to seek out old guys with gray hair to realize that there's many of us out there that are willing to put our heart and souls into mentoring young people. All you have to have is the ability to ask for some guidance, and
some passion.
you wouldn't believe how open-minded our community, the ones that we're talking about, Paul, Ben, with myself, all of us working together have built communities of people, and it's a wonderful community. It's all about people and the occasional bug.